Welcome to the Rational Alternative Weekend Edition, where we normally talk science with my co-host, Dr. Meghann Ribbens, or Dr. Mommy, as she is sometimes known. We've got a great discussion for you today. Hopefully, I can get Meghann to go with the flow today and take my questions in order, because Meghann has a habit of jumping and going to what she wants to talk about. See, she feels that maybe it shouldn't be the Rational Alternative, but the Meghann Ribbens program. But Meghann, first of all, Meghann, it's great to see you once again.
Likewise, yeah. And honestly, okay, there definitely is kind of the white girl privilege going on there where it's
Oh,
well, this
no.
interests me, so obviously we should talk about it. Yeah, honestly, most of the time it's just me. I tell Gracie all the time, I'm not trying to be obtuse. It just comes naturally. So you're asking me a leading question that humans would know where it's going, but you're not talking to a normal human. So I'm like, oh, he's obviously going in this direction over here. Yeah, so that's on me. I'm
So
sorry. I'm
you
doing my
had me
best.
reading about this Francesco Redi. So, but that brought up other questions for me that I think we should explain. So I want to get into them first. First of all, because of what he did and what he discovered, which I want to get to after we discuss these other topics, and I don't think we've actually covered this yet. I want to talk about the scientific method and scientific experiments. What are they? How do they differ?
Um, so the scientific method, as we understand it today, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, was originally formulated by Francis Bacon. Do me a favor, because I was just about to look this up for myself. I can't remember exactly when Bacon published the Novum Organon, and I'd really like to. Okay, so again, Bacon was operating, I want to say, in the middle 1600s. Um, and I think in part, again, this is so embarrassing to admit, I haven't actually read the Novum Organon in its entirety yet. That's on me. To be honest, I've mostly been focusing on his successors, like Herschel and Whewell. So
1620,
thank
Francis
you.
Bacon.
Okay, that's fantastic because that would have been after Galileo's a lot of his major controlled experiment work. Um, Remind me, when was Newton's Principia published? Because this is crucial. This is crucial just because was Bacon taking a lot of people, a lot of philosophers of science really took their cues from Newton. What Newton did was unique and uniquely pivotal.
All right, Newton. Principia. All right.
You can tell that
1687.
okay,
So,
all
right
right.
off the
So
bat, though, I have to tell you. So, all my intellectual life, I've been told that Francis Bacon was the originator of the scientific method.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
He
However, hold your little horses there, Missy. Okay? Can you hold your horses?
I promise nothing.
So, according to who's this? ChatGPT, because I asked a question, I wanted to know specifically what exactly is the scientific method. So, the scientific method, it says it's not really one rigid procedure, but a family of practices for acquiring reliable knowledge about the natural world. And then it goes into what it is. But it says it developed gradually over many centuries. Nobody created it. That's an important correction to the common textbook story. And it actually includes Aristotle for emphasizing observation, Ibn al-Haytham for his contributions to experimental investigation and
Interesting.
testing hypotheses. Galileo Galilei, who we've discussed, he brought in mathematics for it to combine with observation. Francis Bacon argued for systematic empirical investigation and induction. Rene Descartes emphasized systematic doubt, analysis, and deductive reasoning. And then it goes on to some others. So
I know that Descartes was actually helpful there.
I don't think he really was, but the point is they say there was no single inventor. It emerged through the cumulative development of observation, experimentation, induction, deduction, mathematical modeling, and hypothesis testing. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably undercutting what Francis Bacon did.
Well, you are the PhD, and I'm the schmuck with an iPhone. So I mean, I will concede that.
No, it's not. And again, I'm obviously not an expert on Bacon. So Bacon is credited for the scientific method that, and I'm gonna say this over and over again because it cannot be emphasized enough. You know, you start with observation.
I'm going to test you. Hold on. Go ahead. Okay, observation. Right. Yes, that's number 1 on the list.
Thank you. When you see, and this really isn't emphasized when it's taught in school, but when you see correlating observations, which means you have to have a mathematical, in some sense, correlation, you hypothesize that these correlating observations have a causal connection. But that's not enough.
So hold on. So it goes observation, 2 is question. So you missed the question, but I'm going to give it to you because it kind of sounds like that's what you're describing.
Kind of sounds like you're mansplaining, but thank you.
3, no, GTP splaining, and 3 is hypothesis. So you're there.
Anyway, so let's tie this to an example, right? You observe that most people who get breast cancer wear bras, right? You see that some of them prefer.
You had me at bras. Once you said bras, I'm lost now. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up, right? So it's an example we brought up before. It seemed to work really well. So let's do it again. All right. So you notice that a lot of them have long hair, but not all of them. A lot of them have nice hips, but not all of them, right? But most of them wear bras, right? Okay, so those are correlating observations. Breast cancer, bras. Seems pretty solid, right? Okay, so the hypothesis is the point where you say, I think bras cause breast cancer. So, okay, could be. That is a hypothesis for a causal connection between the two, right? So you then might test it. Now, you don't force, people who might be prone to breast cancer to not wear bras.
I'm gonna give you a prediction. Yeah, I'm gonna need you to say the actual words, Meghann, because we have the list.
Oh my God, I don't even think that Francis Bacon wrote that bit. You know what I mean? So just.
Oh, we're only going to cover Francis Bacon and just ignore everybody else?
We're in the 1600s now. That's not like over, like lean too far over our skis or whatever the euphemism is. Anyway, okay, so you look at people who don't wear bras and see, okay, well, most of them are men. They don't tend to get breast cancer, but among the women who don't wear bras, there doesn't seem to be any difference in terms of how many of them get breast cancer versus women that wear bras. Like the prevalence of breast cancer doesn't seem to matter, at least among women, whether you wear a bra or not. It says, okay, now we've actually tested the hypothesis. We've done the experiment, right? Now, let me pause at this point in the scientific method and say that this part here is revolutionary, right? And I think fair to say we can thank Galileo for that. Like if you remember a couple of weeks ago, right? He started by just, measuring his heartbeat and noticing how long it took a chandelier to swing back and forth. And even as it looked like it was slowing down, it actually didn't take any longer or shorter for it to go through a single period. Like the distance it traveled was less each time, but the time it took was the same. And incidentally, this is what allowed people to, I don't think Galileo actually built a pendulum clock, but other people did. And so for the longest time, that was the most accurate way we could keep time, was with Galileo's observation that pendula, as long as they're swinging, will always maintain a perfectly timed period, right? In fact, Gracie and I, when I think she was 7, we built a pendulum clock, just to show that that's what's keeping time. It's just that back and forth. Anyway, what did Galileo actually do? Right? Well, he didn't, kind of willy-nilly, try, I'm going to try a silver bob, the end of the pendulum, and a gold bob. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't being arbitrary in what he isolated and altered, right? He said, I'm going to try a heavy bob and a light bob. Maybe that makes a difference. Turns out, no. I'm going to try a long string and a short string, but release them at the same height and time. Does that make any difference? No. He was very careful in what he isolated and varied. And let me kind of tie this to my daughter, because really that's the subtext for everything I say, is Gracie and how much I love her. When she was 4, I tried doing the same thing. I can't even remember what the experiment was now, but I was trying to show her, okay, we've got, this beaker full of stuff, right? And it's doing something weird. We can change just one thing in that beaker and see if we see the same thing. If we don't, that's saying that one thing we changed is fundamentally important to the weird phenomenon we're seeing. And what was interesting is that...
Hold on, we have a problem. Greg Lewis says that Galileo died before the invention of the pendulum clock.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think Galileo invented the pendulum clock. He was the one who precipitated the idea, right?
Okay. All right.
There's actually a really great follow-up story.
Okay, we're gonna, but we need some focus here for just a second.
No, I need to finish my story about my beloved daughter, because obviously everyone wants to hear about Gracie.
They're gonna hear about her. I promise they're gonna hear about her. I promise. But I need you to explain what the scientific method is, what experimentation is, and how the two concepts.
Just let me flow. Just let me flow. You didn't think anyone was going to turn that around on you, did you?
No, you can flow. It's good, but you got to flow within the parameters.
No. I'm going to flow, and you're going to go along with it, and everyone will be happy. All right. So at 4, I probably should have seen this coming, but I'm not a pedagogist. Gracie didn't understand what I was doing. She didn't see that if I kept everything the same except one thing, and the result was different, that indicated a causal connection. She just thought I was just mixing things up, right? So she would take her own beaker and she'd just throw stuff in there, right? And, again, if I had known something about childhood development, this probably wouldn't have shocked me, but it was really interesting to me that there's a point in an individual human development, and quite frankly, a point in human history where this becomes a unique and powerful idea, right? It takes a certain amount of development in an individual's life where they can see not just correlation, but what it means when you change a single variable and the result is different, right? When you do the experiment. Thank you. And it's a very, very late development in human history. If you think about Aristotle getting the ball rolling on sort of a pun, on science in general, right? In mid 300s BC, getting to Francis Bacon and Galileo slightly before him, around the same time. That's about 2,000 years. And when you think of the whole of human history as like at its shortest, like 500,000 years, that's really late in the game and like a big deal. So circling back to the
Just so you know,
scientific method.
my OCD brain is like on fire
Okay,
right
well,
now.
what can we do to help you other
Okay.
than do what you ask?
That's all you can ever do is do what I ask. Is I want to have there's a very important reason. I want to have an explanation of scientific method, but I need it differentiated from scientific experiments.
Okay, so I am glad that you were asking this. I know I'm giving you an immense amount of grief right now, but this is my love language. So this is how you know I'm comfortable with you, and
I've
I
read the book.
cherish you.
There's five of them. This is not one.
Well,
There's five love languages.
obviously they have not met me yet.
Okay, well, fair.
Okay, so um, now you got me in a whole different place here. Okay, so the scientific method, as I said, starts with observation. At least the sort of canonical Baconian scientific method, observation. You start seeing correlating observations and you hypothesize that there is a causal connection. And then you figure out how you might test to see if there in fact is a causal connection. Now, at its simplest, that means you change one or the other of those observations. For instance, you look closely at observations of people who don't wear bras, and see how prevalent breast cancer is in them. And that's where the experimentation comes in. Typically, it is that you keep everything the same. That's a controlled experiment where everything is the same across all of your test samples except one thing. And that one thing is the variable you're testing for to see what the causal connection, if any, is. Um, if so, let me tell you something. It sounds really simple, but when you get into biological conditions, what does it actually mean to keep everything the same? Because even in like, your typical model bacterium, right? They have genes for roughly 2,000 different proteins, right? So at any one time, is any one cell have the exact same concentration of all 2,000 proteins at the same time? No. I mean, not even close. Like there's
All
so
right.
much variation from like it, and it's not like you can say, okay, and believe me, I've tried. Like I've gotten down at I'm not proud of this, but I've gotten down at eye level with my test tubes and said, all right, listen here, everyone, this is what I need you to do, right? And I've tried to explain to them how they should all be as similar to their clones as possible. And guess what? That got me exactly nowhere. You do your best you can. So in terms of controlled experiments, what Galileo did was revolutionary, but it's probably for the best that he didn't try to do this with biological systems because there's so many
So I have
opinions.
an important question for you. Very important.
All
Okay.
right.
I want to know why these things are important. Okay. Ceteris paribus scenario, all things held equal.
Mm-hmm.
Independent variable, dependent variable. Control group, experimental group, random assignment. Why are these things all important when doing scientific experiments?
Okay. Um, this is where I think Redi is a helpful
Don't get
example.
into him. Don't go to him
No,
yet.
I mean these things
Hold
relate.
on.
These are not
I
completely
have
separate
it. No,
things.
but I have it in my head. There's a beautiful order
Okay,
here,
then
and
why
you're
don't you answer the question?
because I just want you to tell us what is the importance of the experimental method, the dynamics that I just asked. Why are they important?
Um, one, correlation does not equal causation. It may be causally related. It need not be. And the case of like bras versus breast cancer is a really good example. They are correlated. They're not causally related. If you stop wearing bras, it does not make you any less likely to get breast cancer. So if you want to keep
No,
wearing
but it
your
could
bras, by
cause
all
other
means, you
problems.
can. Yeah, that's true.
From what I understand, there are problems. So that's the exact answer that I was fishing for, right? Because you need to be able to
Why wouldn't you
identify.
say that?
Because you're here to do that. You're smarter than I am. You're
No,
prettier than
well,
I am.
thank you. Um,
So here's the thing. So you identify causation, right? And tell me if I'm wrong. So when you are able to hold all things equal and have a control group and an experimental group, you are able to identify which things are actually causing other events to happen. So the independent variable is the causer and the dependent variable is the causee. And when you have control groups and experimental groups, you're able to, when you hold everything equal, see what is what the effect that the independent variable is actually having. Is that accurate? Did I get it all
yes.
right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So now you're going to really love my next question. You're going to love this one so much. I promise you, you're going to love this.
I hope
What I
that's
want
true.
to know is what is spontaneous generation and how does it differ from abiogenesis?
Okay, so spontaneous generation was the, fair to say, long held belief that at least some living things just arise, right? Like nobody believed that you could have people just come about, right? Like so an example, I want to say in Homer, or it was just funny because we were actually just reading about this in the Lagoon, which is all about Aristotle's biological investigations. Like nobody thought that like if you had a battlefield full of dead human bodies, right? That it had all the ingredients of humans, just not any living humans. Like no human was just going to sort of pop out of the ground, right? As, kind of a combination of all of these dead bodies, right? And yet it was really hard to pin down where a lot of organisms came from, right? Like you leave some meat out and all of a sudden there'd be worms in it and then there'd be flies. Like what? Like
You're
where did
so
the flies?
sneaky. You are so sneaky. You're so sneaky. You're just trying to worm your way in. Pun intended. Okay,
Well
go
done.
ahead. Go
Um,
ahead.
so the idea of spontaneous germination was that like some things just, if the conditions are right. So one famous example from the Middle Ages was like if you had like filth and wheat somewhere, mice would appear. Like they would just sort of assemble themselves from the filth and weeds. They weren't born from other mice. They would just, somehow their bones would, I don't know like what they were thinking, but you know what I mean? Like they would just sort of pop into existence. And I'm being a little flippant, but there was a lot of plausibility to that, right? Like what you were talking about the other day, where you're like, there was like a bucket of rainwater, and all of a sudden there was scuzz. Like, what? How does water equal scuzz? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're right, like that's really bizarre. Um, so that's the general idea of spontaneous generation. Abiogenesis is a term, it's supposed to be a little different, right? Like, because for one thing, you typically use it with respect to how life came about, right? Like, it seems pretty likely there wasn't always life on Earth. For one thing, we're pretty sure that the beginning of Earth, kind of, imagine like our solar system used to be just like a swirl of dust, right? But gravity is a powerful thing, and some, the mass of the dust would attract the mass of this other dust, and they'd come together, and that was more massive, so that would attract the dust. Like anything that was close enough and massive enough, it would attract that, and eventually bodies would start to accrete into a star and into planets. And when that started to happen, right, like pulling, when you get as massive as, proto-Earth, that means you're not just attracting massive dust, you're attracting things like asteroids and comets, and they kind of come in fast and they come in hot, right? So you can imagine early Earth was really hot and constantly bombarded. There was probably not life at that point. So how did we get from this accreting, hot, super bombarded protoplanet to what we have today, which is lush and full of water and, you know, thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of different species, and some of them are really weird, and some of them podcasts. Like, how does this happen? It's a mystery that to this day we don't have a complete answer to. Some people think that it actually came from another planet, but that just kicks the can down the road, right? Like, okay, so
or across the solar system, as the
sure, exactly, yeah. So it's called, this idea is called panspermia, that like life came from another planet or solar system and essentially like pollinated our planet. Great, if that's the case, fine, but it still doesn't answer the question, how does life get going where there wasn't life before? It's an area of very active investigation to this day. We have a good hint, and I am jumping like 300 years ahead, but there's a very famous experiment called the Miller-Urey Experiment, where this grad student, I think Miller was the grad student.
Ooh.
Go ahead.
If I'm not mistaken, you got to tell me, is this the experiment where they basically created what they thought were the conditions at the origins of life, and then they shocked the hell out of it, and they actually were able to generate DNA, the beginning, the building blocks of life? Is that the experiment?
That is exactly the experiment. They had a beaker of like what they thought early Earth atmosphere was like, which is vastly different from what it is today. And yeah, they added some, they thought there was probably a lot of lightning happening at that time, and lightning shooting through the atmosphere actually causes chemical reactions. For example, most of our atmosphere today is nitrogen, N2. Lightning shoots through it, and now you've got NO2 and NO3, right? Like something that plants can actually use. Like most plants can't use just straight up nitrogen, even though it's all around us. You turn it into NO2, NO3, that's essentially fertilizer, right? So they were thinking, okay, just put a little energy into this early Earth atmosphere. What happens? I don't think they predicted what did happen, which is what you said. Now you're getting amino acids, like the building blocks of protein. And now you're getting nucleosides, the building blocks of DNA and RNA. And by the way, ATP, which is our primary energy source for all life on Earth, right? It could have been like GTP or CTP or TTP, right? Like the other nucleic acids in DNA, right? DNA is A, G, C, and T, right? So why is A our ATP energy source? Could have been any one of them, except that it's really easy to make ATP just from shooting some lightning through Earth's early atmosphere. Is probably the answer.
Okay. Hold on now. Now we're going to get to the really good stuff. Now, what I want you to talk to us about is, who was Francesco Redi, and how did he disprove spontaneous generation, and what does this have to do with scientific experimentation?
All right.
See that? Do you see how the whole thing has just been laid out for you, and now you just boom?
I like my approach better. Just saying.
No, I think that your approach would have us, we'd be in Peru somewhere. So
say that like it's a bad thing.
Well, it is when I have to be in New London, Connecticut in an hour and a half.
Fair
Okay, or
enough.
2 hours. Okay, so
Okay, I
now
sympathize with you.
go ahead. Now dazzle us with your brilliance.
Uh, I'll try. Let me just say parenthetically that poor Miller in this Miller-Urey experiment, what I heard, this is just the rumor, was that he's really annoyed that he's most famous for work he did in graduate school and not his decades of work as a PhD. I don't know. I think that's a good problem to have, but you know, Miller, you do you. Anyway, okay, so now we have a kind of difference between spontaneous generation, which is like, oh, I see some filth over there. No, I see some mice. QED. Um, versus abiogenesis. Like, okay,
I have that
is
tattooed right here. QED.
QED nice?
I can't get it to show for some reason.
I love it.
Hey, right there.
No, that's so
QED.
great. And by the way, my Latin is rubbish, but I still love it. Anyway, okay. Versus abiogenesis, like, is life fundamentally, or the beginnings of life, the origin of life, fundamentally a chemical process? Because if it is, we can predict what other planets might have had life generate somewhere in them, right? And we might even be able to predict kind of life. Is it a DNA protein based life or something slightly different or radically different? It's a very worthwhile question to ask. Whereas spontaneous generation is frankly kind of lazy thinking. So here comes Francesco Redi. And let me just personalize this a little bit. I like him because he's not like me, right? Like, I grew up with adults who would assert things very authoritatively when they were just talking out of their ass. And you'd really be punished if you were like, I don't know that makes sense. Francesco Redi, and I think he was really inspired by Galileo being kind of an iconoclast. You know, he heard that Athanasius, what's his face, was like, oh, these magnetic stones, I can help you cure your snake bite with those. And he's like, what? I don't think so. So he was like the original MythBuster, right? And I really dig that he like, instead of me who was just meekly kind of accepting what authority told me, he was like, I don't think so, and would actually go out and test it. So he tested these. I actually don't know, like, if he got someone bitten by a snake and then tried these stones, that, like, I don't know. I don't exactly want to know. Let's just assume everyone's fine, everyone's happy. But he proved that the snake stones were total BS, right? They were like snake oil. It's not a thing. And then Athanasius, what's his face, is like, oh, and also, I actually tried these different mixtures of filth, and critters came out of them. And again, Redi was like, I don't think so. But he had a really productive sort of back and forth with the proponents of spontaneous generation, right? Like, if you just have meat out in the sun and meat in like a closed, like a completely sealed glass jar, right? It's sort of trivial to say, I don't see any flies coming on this meat in the glass jar, right? The conditions are not the same. There are a lot of variables that you haven't kept the same. So someone could say, oh, flies don't like glass jars, or oh, like, if, for example, if you kept them both in a cellar and you didn't see flies, people could reasonably say, well, if flies don't like it, it's too cold. They're not interested in either slab of meat, right? So what Redi had to do was really think about the polemics. Like, if I do the experiment this way, people are going to come back and say, no, you're coming to the wrong conclusion here. It's obviously this other variable. So, keeping those polemics in mind, and the trolls, which is actually can be helpful, he kept things very, very similar. Slab of meat in a jar, slab of meat in a jar with gauze, right? Everything was the same. They were right next to each other. Same temperature, same air, same everything. The only difference was the gauze, right? Shock of shocks. Flies landed on the meat in the jar without the gauze, and later flies were coming out of the meat. not so much with the gauze, right? But he followed up, right? He would let the flies land on the meat and then he would shoo them away and cover it with gauze so that no more could come along. And flies appeared from the meats. Now, if the flies never had a chance to land, you could bet that there were not going to be any flies coming out of the meat. So this is weird, right? Like, okay, flies definitely need to land, but what the heck do they do when they land? And that's where he, definitely benefited from that new technology, the microscope, and could actually see, wait, there are things that look like eggs? Are flies egg laying? And then he see that like worms were coming out of the eggs. Like, wait, what? Like again, at this time, it's hard to kind of put ourselves in that mindset of like maggots and flies are the same species. Like, no, no, no. Maggots are just worms. They have no limbs, right? Flies have 6 limbs and wings. These are not the same. They don't look anything like each other, right? It's not like a baby versus an adult. They have the same number of limbs, general same body plan. It's not like that with insects, and nobody suspected that. Um, so yeah, just to kind of conclude, right? Like Redi, okay, first of all, he was kind of a firebrand, like he was, kind of flippant and very, like very willing to challenge authority. But he also took a lot of really valuable lessons from the trolls. You know what I mean? Like as much as I don't know, some people really enjoy dealing with the trolls. I really don't. But I have to admit that they can actually be really helpful. Um, and they certainly were to Redi. Did I answer your question?
You absolutely did. Now you
Okay.
wanted to ask me a question about this type of things.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you want to, you're perfectly
Sure.
welcome.
And like I just want to repeat what we were chatting about off air is like this is definitely not like I don't know. Again, I was raised in the Midwest where like the primarily the way you were raised is with guilt tripping, which like never I was like no, I don't feel guilty about this. And also, but like, so like, I find it incredibly off-putting the whole guilt tripping thing. Um, Not to say that I probably don't do it at some point. We should get Gracie in here and see if that's actually true. But in any case, this is definitely not meant to be a guilt trip. This is meant to be a fact-finding mission. And I'd actually like to have both you and the audience be my focus group if you're so inclined.
Sure.
Um, because And there's really a couple of reasons I'm going to ask this question. So let me
Oh,
ask the question and then I'll tell you my reasoning. So, like, you've mentioned a couple of times that you're reluctant to, grab a sample for your herbarium, right? Or like you definitely don't want to breed flies even though you'd be already, and like actually breeding fruit flies will like allow you to be literally do a Darwin and literally do a Mendel. Like I'm really proud of this set of experiments because it goes on for more than a month and it like builds through like these giants of biology, and yet you're reluctant to do it. Okay, why? And try to understand why this is so puzzling to me, right?
hmm
I remember, Grace is in 5th grade now. I remember almost nothing academic of 5th grade. The one thing I do remember was at one point we had these stations around the classroom where we had different like grabby tools and different like prey, right? Like there was like dried kidney beans versus I don't know, whatever else. It was meant to show like how different beaks are better adapted to different kinds of food for birds, right? It's the only thing I remember. And we all know it's bullshit, right? Like this isn't an actual experiment. It's better than just like randomly putting together marshmallow toothpick molecules, right? When you have no idea what a molecule is. It's slightly better than that in terms of hands-on science, but it's not actually doing science. So the idea to me that I would actually be doing experiments and gathering my own data like would have been a godsend to me. And I'm an
okay.
atheist. Um And yet, like, when I'm trying to do a couple of things when I'm making these materials and selling them to students. One of them is I will give a discount to parents if the parents will do it with their student, because I have two jobs, right? One is to teach people how to observe and be good problem solvers. The other is to convince parents that that is fundamentally different and better than just putting together marshmallow toothpick molecule models, right? And it's surprisingly challenging. So as I would love for parents to do the thing and teach them why this is better. And it's
Mm-hmm.
such an uphill battle. It's like pretty
Okay.
much vertical. So I'm trying to understand this. And I
Okay.
don't.
So Phil has given 10 pounds, and Phil, I promise I will get to your question. Thank you so much, but I do want to answer Meghann first. Okay, first of all, in relation to gathering up samples for herbarium, time is very limited. My day is, I'm scurrying for time between my podcast, between my reading, my day job, spending time with my girlfriend, making time for myself. To try to fit something like going out and gathering samples, that's not really top priority for me.
Mm,
As far as doing experiments here, okay, so if to do them on air, first of all, I wouldn't know how to direct the camera so that they could actually
yeah, no,
watch
I'm not going to ask you to do them on air. Like, even
what
I
it is I'm
struggle
doing.
and I made these experiments.
Okay, so that's the other thing. Also, I'm in somebody else's home. So it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
like I own my own house. If I bring, like the other day, you had sent me this stuff, right? And I had it out on the table. Let me just see if I can show it. I don't know if people can
Hmm.
see that this is filled with red. Both of them are. So my friend slash landlord calls me and says, Mike, what the hell is that? Is that blood? And so I have to explain it
In
to
a
him.
way.
Also, now I have this stuff accumulating with very little space. I have all this science stuff accumulating and really nowhere to put it. Now you're asking about sending fruit flies to my friend's home. Now I
Flightless
now
fruit flies.
I hate flies to begin with. But on top of it all, I have to bring living flies into my friend's home who
Yeah.
might not appreciate it. So all of these reasons taken together, plus the fact that I'm not good with these when it comes to work. So doing experiments, I'm not really confident that I would do the experiments right to where it would be of value to an audience. Now, none of these things have anything to do with were I a parent. Were I a parent, I would have my own place because I wouldn't have kids before I did. So I would have my own place, and my child's education would be of paramount importance. So then that value would be worth learning how to do these things properly, doing the research online. How do I do this? What's the best way to do it? Whereas right now, it's really not at
Mm.
the top of the value hierarchy.
No, that is totally fair. Um, to be honest, I had like I had a kind of hypothesis as to what you would say, and it was none of those things, right? So, for example, I don't know if this is true, but I sometimes get the impression as I'm talking to other parents about what Gracie and I are doing, that they think I'm like virtue signaling, right? Like that I'm trying to make them feel bad that they're not doing this, and like it took me years for that thought to even occur to me, right? Like it's not like that at all, right? Like I've been a single parent Gracie's entire life. I know how exhausting and time consuming it is. I know what it's like to like feel like, oh my gosh, I get to go to bed before 10 p.m. This is amazing. um, so the idea that I would like make another parent's life harder or make them feel bad that yes, they also are exhausted and time consumed is insane to me. But I think some parents think that that's what I'm trying to do. Um yeah, so and part of it's just that like yeah, like I'm trying to give 5th grade me what I wish my teachers could have given me. They couldn't, so, but like at the same time, like I'm still struggling to understand why not every adult doesn't wish that they could give themselves this, or their fifth grade selves this thing.
Well,
And
how do
it's
you know they don't
true.
want to?
Well,
The
I mean,
problem is you're
my
projecting your
sales are,
values onto them.
yeah,
So
that's
for
exactly
me to
true.
give my fifth grade self what my fifth grade self would want would have nothing to do with biology.
Mm.
So
Okay.
Phil, hold on. We're going to get to. So I want to ask you a question, but first, Phil has a question. Hi, Dr. Ribbens. Do you think the Feynman method of simplistic explanation to lay people could apply to complicated subjects like philosophy, e.g., objectivism?
Um, I'm not exactly sure what you I think. First of all, thank you for the question. And you might want to circle back and make sure. I'm going to test my understanding. So if I'm off the mark, please say something and I'll try to refine my answer. So my understanding, and I'm certainly no expert on Feynman. I know some stuff. But I haven't read all of his books. So, his idea, and it's not an idea unique to him, certainly. But it was that if you could teach the gist of an idea to a layperson, a person naive to the whole field, you yourself had a pretty strong understanding of the phenomenon, right? If I can explain to you, like, I know quite a bit about genetics, but if I can explain to you that, like, it's really reasonable to assume that genetics is all about blending and that traits are infinitely blendable. So, what a shock it was to Mendel that when he bred tall plants with short plants, they didn't come out in the middle. They always came out tall and just as tall as the one parent. Um, that was pretty shocking. And when he bred the first generation together and the second generation, he didn't see tall and medium tall. He saw those short plants and just as short as the grandparent, right? So it's not like the trait just went away and it's not like it blended. It just kind of disappeared and came back again. If I can explain genetics in that way, I think I have a pretty good grasp of the phenomenon of genetics. Now, if you want to talk about inducers and suppressors and promoters and that sort of thing, we can do that too. But for most people, you just want to have like a general understanding of genetics. So I think that's really valuable. The question is, can you apply that to philosophy? And I'm certainly no philosopher, so I feel like I'm kind of going outside my lane here. I think you probably have to. I think it's probably a general principle of epistemology is that you have to be able to reduce it back, first of all, to something concrete, but something very like a relatable concrete. So at one point, as an example, Peikoff talks about, you know, do you really need philosophy after a certain point in your life? It's pretty much the same question as asking, do I really need to pay attention if a truck is barreling toward me at fatal speeds? Right? Like, I've seen trucks before, I know what they do. I don't need to pay attention to this truck. No, 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 no. There has to be an immediacy to the truck, and there has to be an immediacy to philosophy. So that example is very relatable, right? Now you could get into the technicalities of logic.
I think you might have butchered the metaphor a little bit, but but
Sorry.
okay.
Do you want to like
No, I'm not sure because I'm not sure exactly what you're thinking
oh,
about. I think what you're talking about is where Peikoff talks about, for instance, that nobody is going to deliberately drink poison because, or not nobody, but most people wouldn't because they can see the immediate effects. Whereas with
mm,
abstract ideas, you can't see the immediate effects, but they're nonetheless real. And he wanted people to learn how to take the abstract and make them concrete, like a truck hitting them, because
yeah.
people won't walk out in front of a truck because they know the result. but these abstract ideas have the same long-term result, and he wanted to give it that truck-like
Yeah.
clarity.
Yeah.
So
But that was a really effective way of like,
I
like
thought so,
he
yeah.
kind of like set up this problem of like, some people get into objectivism and then they say, you know what, it ruffles too many people's feathers. I just don't want anything to do with philosophy anymore. Or they say, you know what, it was helpful when I was starting my career, but now I'm fairly established. I don't need philosophy anymore. He's like, if I could make philosophy as immediate as an oncoming truck, right? Like,
So
you wouldn't say that.
so this Feynman thing, and I've never heard of this before right now, but it's a four-step
Sorry, do
mental
you know who
model.
Richard Feynman is?
Yes,
Okay.
I do, but I don't know much about him other than I think he said people who a first sign that someone doesn't understand quantum mechanics is claiming they understand quantum mechanics or some such thing that he's alleged to have said like that. So it's a four-step model that he created, and it states that if you cannot explain a concept simply to a child, you do not truly understand it. The method uses plain language and active recall to expose and fix gaps in human knowledge. So the four steps are: pick a topic, explain it plainly, find your weak spots, review and fix. And I do think that's a very good idea. I also am a big fan of Einstein saying that it basically topics should be simplified as much as they can, but no simpler. So to get back to Phil's question is, can this be used for objectivism? Certainly. Whatever you're trying to explain, I think ought to be explained in simplest terms if you want to get your point across. That my only concern is that somebody try to simplify it too much.
I mean, I guess it'd be helpful if Phil, if you want to tell us why you ask. Like, is this
I think I know why I ask it, because Phil is a regular on my other show.
sure,
Phil's looking to promote ideas. He wants to
sure.
see the ideas promoted, so he's looking for the best way to get people to adapt ideas. So if you want to get somebody, for instance, like let's say we want to convince people of the value of reason, the logic or the correctness of egoism, and ultimately the worth, the ethical arguments for capitalism. We don't want to start off with, well, you really need to understand the identification, integration, and the conceptual common denominator. You have to grasp this, and you need to understand teleological ethics and its difference with deontological ethics, so that when you get to capitalism, you're making a normative argument as opposed to a strictly utilitarian argument. To talk like that, you're not going to bring people along. People are going to drift away. So
Right.
then what is the best way to communicate these ideas? But I think there's also the possibility of saying, it's just common sense. Be reasonable. Act in your own interest. That's what's best for you. And obviously, people have rights, and rights. Once you're respecting rights, you have capitalism, because that is just as confusing as the former. Because if you use a term like rights, for instance, so many people have a different idea of what rights are. So to just throw out the language of rights, people will say, oh, yeah, 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 I agree, I agree, I agree. But when you get into what rights actually are, why we have them, it differs. So I do think there's something to this method, and I'm actually going to look into it. Thank you, Phil, because I like it as a model. I
Yeah, I
think
mean, I guess there's still, oh my gosh. Spam.
it's not for
So
me.
maybe I don't know if you want to answer the spam call. Anyway, so again, it'd be worth kind of drilling a little deeper into if you are trying to proselytize, and it sounds like a pejorative. It's definitely not meant to be, right? Um, it, like, what exactly do you want your audience to do? So, for example, I am actually agnostic as to whether Gracie becomes a scientist or not, because I've seen the best and the worst that the field has to offer. So I can understand her, wanting to reach for the best. I can also understand her wanting to avoid the worst of it. Um, but I do, and I hear these conversations among the analysts at my work all the time. Like, I heard a ghost yesterday, or, you know, um, I stopped using sunscreen because sunscreen also causes cancer. You know what I mean? Like, I do want my daughter to be able to evaluate these sorts of claims in a way that, like, best promotes her flourishing. You know what I mean? Whether or not she becomes a scientist, totally up to her. But I do want her to be able to detect bullshit. You know what I mean? And to, like, not avoid things that might prevent cancer because they also have risk involved. You know what I mean? Like, I she could become a writer, or run a pet rescue, but I still want her to be able to evaluate claims in a way that promotes her flourishing. And I want her to always be curious, even when she's confronted with something uncomfortable. So it depends really who you're who you're trying to convince, and of what. Are you trying to convince them um, to have a more positive view of your fellow human being, even if they happen to be a business person? Or are you trying to convince them to vote in a particular way, regarding some sort of proposition at the next election? Like, that's gonna matter, and it's gonna, like, it's gonna matter to whom you're talking.
Well said, Megan. So what I'm going to do, Phil, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention, is I'm going to look into a bit of how to combine Feynman's method with that of the lothos, pathos, and ethos of Aristotle in communicating ideas, because I think there may be something to it. Thank you so much, Phil. Megan, we're out of time, so now is your opportunity to advertise.
All right.
Where can they find you?
So, these materials I've been sending to Mike that have been cluttering up, his home, and annoying his landlord. You can actually purchase them for yourselves or for the children and adults in your life at patreon.com/drmommy, DRMOMMY, no period. And you can check out, like, I've narrated, like, our textbooks, so you can listen to more about Redi, for example, is in there. um I walk you through the experiments and the conclusions. I've done them all myself, right? I had to build them, so you can see kind of what problems I came up against, because I sure did. Like, nothing that you can purchase is iteration one. I will say that. And you can find that at youtube.com/at MARIBBENS. And even if you don't want to purchase or subscribe, let me know what's holding you back, because obviously I can't really understand it, and I would like to. I would like this to grow. I would like more people to get curious and to get good at doing observations and working with their hands, and doing experiments. So I'm not sure what's holding them back, and if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them.
So go to the comments on YouTube and address Megan's question. I think that would be wonderful. Megan, thank you so much. I want to share a humorous story real quickly. Jim Valiant and I recently did an episode of the Michael Liebowitz Show where we discussed words, their meaning, the role of definitions, the
I
role of
heard that one.
dictionaries, etc., etc. So, I make clips and I post them to X, to YouTube, and to Instagram. So the particular video, the clip that I did, I talked about my emphasis on the precision and use of words and their meaning. And so this guy comes in and he comments and he says, "I think that your emphasis on precision and meaning is an obstacle." So then I joked back and I said, "What do you mean?" Right? He proceeded to give me an answer. He didn't understand that I was joking. I don't know if it was lost in translation or what. But either way, thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you've learned something. I know I did. I hope you have a wonderful
too, which is
rest
awesome.
of your weekend. Bye.